that you might be coming from. So glad that you all can join us wherever in the world that you're dialing in from. First, a bit of housekeeping. You saw the little recording session pop up. So this session will be recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, just flip off your video. And with that, just want to say we're really excited to have Doug Kirkpatrick here with us today. For anybody that doesn't know, Doug is one of the originals in the Teal space. He was the first financial controllers for Morningstar, so he was a real OG. Morningstar is obviously the world's largest tomato processing enterprise, made famous among many things, but certainly among Frederick Laloux's reinventing organizations. So while he was there, Doug had a front row seat, as Morningstar really created many of the processes that have come to define self-management. Since then, Doug's been a prolific writer, speaker, educator, trainer, and mentor on the future of work. He's a Forbes speaker, he's a TEDx speaker, he co-founded the Morningstar Self-Management Institute, but nowadays he's the founder of D'Artagnan Advisors, amongst other things. And D'Artagnan Advisors develops adaptive, resilient, and human-centered organizations for the future. He's here today to talk about managing complexity with great simplicity. And we definitely live in complex times. I think we can all agree on that. So Doug is going to be talking for about 30 minutes, give or take. After that, we'll move into Q&A. If you've got questions along the way, drop them in Mentimeter. I'll be dropping the link here in the other chat, and you can upvote the questions that you'd like answered most. But without further ado, I will hand it on over to Doug.
Thank you very much, Travis. Well, the world is getting more complex by the minute, and traditional organizations are not able to keep up. So how do we resolve this challenge? Buckminster Fuller developed what's called the knowledge doubling curve in 1982. How long does it take for the entire body of human knowledge in the world to double? So in 1900, it was about 100 years. 1945, it was about 25 years. Today, we're on our way to 12 hours. The sum of human knowledge is about to double every 12 hours. That's a little bit anxiety creating. How do we keep up with this spigot of voluminous human knowledge? Well, the other thing we're facing is massive technological change. So we now have blockchain, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, genetic engineering, robotics, nanotechnology. Now we have 4D printing. We've already blasted beyond 3D printing now into 4D printing. IBM did a study a few years ago called Capitalizing on Complexity, and they surveyed executives and leaders. They found that most executives doubt their own ability to manage complexity. So this is causing executives and leaders, decision makers to lose sleep, costing them their health. It's not a healthy situation. It's not a good thing. It's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. Writers and authors, researchers tell us now that we have almost unlimited capacity for innovation. So beyond reality and virtuality, we have augmented reality and augmented virtuality, alternate reality, physical virtuality, warped reality, mirrored virtuality, and all these ways of transferring time, space, and matter have created virtually limitless possibilities for innovation. But how do we harvest these opportunities? How do we even take advantage of them unless we're able to distill and understand and capitalize on the huge volume of human knowledge that's being generated? It's creating massive anxiety, massive complexity. Leaders are unable to process it. Change is happening so fast that it's surpassing the human capacity to absorb the change. Another problem in organizations is we're trying to manage all this complexity with the same organizational structures that we developed in 1841. We had a train wreck on the Western Railway, and two locomotives collided on the railway, killing the conductor and injuring a number of other people. It created a great national scandal. So the Western Railway hired Major George Whistler, a civil engineer, to investigate and make recommendations. And so Major George Whistler looked at the Prussian military and brought those ideas to modern business organizations. And those included titles and chains of command and silos and hierarchy and bureaucracy. The express point of bureaucracy in business organizations was to figure out who to blame when things go wrong. I suspect that purpose is not particularly energizing to the rising generation, young people that are entering their careers and trying to figure out what their lives at work actually mean and what their purpose is. So we've got a real challenge trying to figure out how to deal with complexity in organizations. The old bureaucratic structures, the old pyramids, the hierarchies, the brittle, rigid hierarchies are just not capable of handling the volume of complexity that we're dealing with now. So this begs a question: is there a way out? Is there a way to extract ourselves from this morass in which we find ourselves? Is there a way to manage great complexity with great simplicity? Well, this man thinks so. This is D. Hawk. He's the founder of Visa. And D. Hawk famously said that complex rules cause simple, stupid behavior. And simple rules allow for complex, intelligent behavior. So that begs the question, can we create organizations around simple rules that allow for infinitely complex, intelligent behavior? I'd like to think the answer is yes. The reason I think the answer is yes is that I have a story to tell. And so my story began in 1990, 32 years ago, almost exactly 32 years ago to the month. And I joined the core team of an entrepreneurial startup here in Northern California. And our team was pulled together by an entrepreneur named Chris Ruffer. And his vision was to build a state-of-the-art food processing factory. And so I joined him in February of 1990 as the financial controller. And we were working out of a tiny farmhouse on a dusty canal bank here in Northern California. And we had a core team of about 24 people. The rest of my team members were engineers, electricians, construction, project managers, mechanics, electromechanics, quality assurance specialists, and the like, technicians. And one day in March of 1990, our founder, Chris, came into the farmhouse and said he'd like to call a meeting of colleagues and discuss governance and discuss how to organize and design the organization. And we said, sure, that's great. So we all met together at night in a double-wide construction trailer out on the job site. And we sat around in a circle on steel folding chairs, and our founder handed out a document titled the Morningstar Team Principles. And in that document, he proposed that we organize around two very simple principles. So the first principle was that human beings should not use force or coercion against other human beings. And if you think about that principle, it's the foundation of all law everywhere in the world. So every law against assault and battery, theft and burglary, kidnapping, murder, and all the rest is predicated on the principle that humans shouldn't use force against other people. The second principle was that people should keep the commitments they make to each other. If you think about that principle, it's also a foundation of law, especially civil and contract law, which would mean nothing if people and organizations didn't keep the promises that they make to each other. And so we thought about these principles when we discussed them and debated them for a couple of hours. And at the end of the evening, we just looked at each other around the circle and said, well, we don't have any objections to these principles. They're self-evident principles. They make perfect sense. And so we adopted them as the entire governance of the enterprise. And the enterprise was called Morningstar. And when we walked out of that trailer, we were a self-managed enterprise. This was March of 1990, almost exactly 32 years ago. Well, we still had a lot of work to do. We had thousands of acres, hectares of tomatoes coming up out of the ground, up and down the state of California for 400 kilometers. We had hundreds of contractors on the job site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constructing, fabricating, welding, pulling wire. We had to hire hundreds of people to operate the factory and drive the trucks. And we had vital equipment arriving on ocean cargo freighters out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, waiting to go through the Panama Canal. But finally, on July 16th of 1990, we turned on the switch and we produced 90 million pounds, or about 45 million kilograms of industrial tomato concentrate for the world market. And we changed the cost structure of our entire industry virtually overnight. And we did it without a single human boss. No bosses, no managers, no supervisors, no vice presidents, no titles of any kind, just team members and work, performing work together and collaborating. So the company went on to grow. We added another factory and then another factory. We expanded operations up and down the supply chain toward customers in remote warehouses across North America, and toward the supply in terms of farming and harvesting, transplanting and trucking. In the process of that growth, we became the largest tomato processor in the world, a billion-dollar company with thousands of people, exporting worldwide. At this point, I believe everyone in North America has eaten our product. It goes into everything you can think of in the grocery store, from ketchup to salsa, pizza sauce, barbecue sauce, spaghetti sauce, and 1,000 other products. And we export worldwide, so I believe millions of people around the world, in Asia, Europe, and elsewhere, have eaten our product as well. And we've never deviated from our two core principles. Don't use force, and keep your commitments. How can this possibly work? Well, we can look at examples, other examples in the real world of organizing around simple principles. This is an overhead shot of a roundabout. This roundabout happens to be located in Swindon, England. It's actually 7 roundabouts in one. There's an inner circle, an outer circle, and 5 circles in between. And cars can take whatever route they wish to get from point A to point B. But a roundabout operates on 2 simple principles. Number 1, you yield to the cars already in the roundabout. Number 2, you position your car in the correct lane to exit. As long as you know the 2 simple principles, you can navigate any roundabout anywhere in the world, even if it's 7 roundabouts in one. The amazing thing about roundabouts is that they have far less pollution than traditional intersections. No one's starting and stopping. They're far safer than traditional intersections. And the productivity is far higher because people drive all the way through without stopping. Almost 85% higher in some cases. So it is possible to organize very complex transactions and work and activity around very, very simple principles. Two principles in a roundabout, just like the two principles at Morningstar: don't use force and keep commitments. So how can this possibly work? Many people are skeptical. I've told this story all over the world. I've actually had people stand up and tell me they don't believe me, which is fine, completely fine. But how does this work in real life? Well, one of the ways it works is that we start with principle. The two principles that I articulated are the two most foundational principles of human interaction. They are to human beings what gravity is to physics. Imagine a world where everyone abandoned the use of force against other people. We wouldn't need armies or navies or police or locks on our doors. What's happening in Ukraine this week wouldn't be happening if everyone embraced the principle of non-use of force. Now, we know that's not realistic. We understand that's not reality, but that's not really the point. The point is, the closer we get to that ideal state, whether it's in an organization or a household or a society as a whole, the better off we are as human beings, and the more space we open up for human happiness, harmony, prosperity, teamwork, and all the good things of life. Imagine a world where every single person did what they said they were going to do. What an amazing world that would be to live in. And again, we know that's not realistic. We understand that's not reality, but that's not really the point. The point is, the closer we get to that ideal state, the better off we are as human beings, the more space we open up for human happiness, harmony, prosperity, teamwork, and all the good things of life. These two principles are the most foundational principles of human interaction. And they also form virtually the entire governance of the Morningstar Company and created its trajectory over the last 32 years. We ask people to give up power. That's not easy for traditional managers. Many business schools teach people how to acquire power, how to rise up the career ladder, how to acquire more titles, more prestige, more power. But we ask people to give up power. At Morningstar, no one has the ability to tell another person to stop doing one thing and start doing another thing. Everything is accomplished by request and response. And people have a right to say no. It's okay to negotiate with those requests. No one has the power to use force or coercion against any other person. We see people as the ultimate reality. Teams are concepts, business units are concepts, companies are concepts. Only human beings are real. Only human beings can make decisions. Only human beings can take actions. Human beings are the ultimate reality. And every business that's ever been created or ever will be created is organized to solve or fulfill one of 8 simple human needs. Once you get beyond food, clothing, and shelter, it's communication, transportation, entertainment, personal security, and healthcare. That's it. Those are the commercial needs of human beings, and businesses are designed to fulfill those because human beings are the ultimate reality. And it's about managing great complexity with great simplicity. If you can grow from 0 to become a billion-dollar enterprise whose products are consumed by most everyone in the country in which it operates and millions more around the world, based on 2 simple principles, it's clearly possible to manage great complexity with great simplicity. The world found this interesting. In 2010, Gary Hamel came out and spent a day with us. And then in December 2011, he was the author of this cover story in the Harvard Business Review inside the world's most creatively managed company. People are trying to figure out how it's possible to manage this great complexity with great simplicity. The mechanism that we use to do this is we use what's called a colleague letter of understanding. So we create agreements between peers, each of whom has an equal voice, each of whom has equal amounts of agency to negotiate their roles and responsibilities with their fellow colleagues. And we ask people to identify the who, what, why, when, where, and how of their work. What is their role? And we start with purpose. So what is your purpose? Why are you here? What does excellence look like in your role? How does what you do contribute to the mission, vision, values, and principles of the enterprise? Why do you come to work every day? And what are the services that you provide? Exactly what is it that you do to create and deliver value on a continuous basis? And we ask people to think about the scope of their decision-making authority with respect to each of those services. Are you the decision maker? Are you merely making recommendations to another decision maker? Or are you requiring input from others prior to making a decision about a particular service? It's about clarity, accountability, and transparency. It's about accountability between peers. Why? Because no one has a boss, no one has a manager telling them what to do. People have to be self-organized, self-motivated, ultimately self-managed. So we ask people to accept the reality of zero command authority. And zero means zero. I mentioned earlier, no one can tell anyone else what to do. This is very difficult for some people to accept, but it is truly zero means zero. There's no command authority whatsoever. And we believe that this lack of command authority leads to stronger leadership. It leads to natural leadership. If I have to earn the mantle of leadership through trust, respect, and communication, that makes me a stronger, better leader. If I can exercise leadership simply by issuing commands and telling people what to do, that's really not leadership. That's just telling people what to do. Command authority causes leadership muscles to atrophy and get weaker. The absence of power and zero command authority allows leaders to emerge, and it causes leadership muscles to become stronger and better and more productive. So we believe in natural leadership. And in this environment of natural leadership, everyone can be an innovator, everyone can be a leader. We've had great examples of this over the years. We had a mechanic who walked through the factory and spotted better ways of material handling. So we sketched out some engineering diagrams and talked to a finance colleague and found some budget, implemented a capital project that saved millions of dollars just based on his own perception, his own leadership, his own ability to think and act in a way that expressed his full agency and autonomy. And we believe at Morningstar that work is play. We try to gamify all work. We ask people to identify metrics that allow them to keep score and to play the game of work in a way that's most enthusing for them. Because when there's no boss walking through a workspace, people have to be able to tell themselves how well they're doing. They play the game of work, and they play it at a high level. So I mentioned that we have these contracts. The contracts are a complete replacement for bureaucracy. And this is what it looks like. This is the org chart of Morningstar's first factory. I'm the blue dot in the upper section. But Morningstar's first factory came together. This is a shot, a frame from a time-lapse movie. that shows how people form the connections by and between each other using the colleague letters of understanding. A few years later, some colleagues took all the colleague letters of understanding from the entire enterprise, took them to a computer lab at the University of California, Davis, which digitized them and projected them in three-dimensional space. This is the Morningstar org chart as a whole. And if it were a movie, it would be in constant motion as people negotiate and renegotiate their roles and responsibilities and enter and exit the ecosystem. As you can see, as you look at this org chart, it's a little bit like a spider web. The spider silk by weight is 5 times stronger than steel. This is an extremely strong, extremely robust, extremely resilient organizational design based on self-managed autonomy and agency. If a few people chose to leave, it literally doesn't matter, because remaining colleagues will quickly reallocate roles and responsibilities to fill any gaps. So in Morningstar, we have a large quantum of accountability, clarity, and flexibility and accountability. We believe in true competition. Competition, the root word for competition is competere, which is a Latin root word. It means seeking and learning together. It's not about defeating another business unit or another factory or even a business competitor. It's about learning everything we can from each other on a continuous basis and creating a strong, vibrant, living organism that is constantly learning and growing and prospering from its learning activities. We virtually never talk about empowerment at Morningstar. Empowerment generally means one person with power is lending his or her power to a subordinate who has less power. The problem with that scenario is that anything that is loaned can be repossessed at any time. Self-management is beyond empowerment. Self-management is power itself. And we believe in the impeccability of commitment making and commitment keeping. When people make promises, they're expected to keep their promises or to renegotiate the promise. It's not okay to make a promise and just let it slide. That is not okay, and that would lead to a breakdown or a failure of self-management in ways that are minor or major. So commitment making and commitment keeping needs to be impeccable, and colleagues hold each other accountable for their own commitments and for the commitments of others in the ecosystem. So these colleague letters of understanding are a complete and total replacement for bureaucracy. They create a living organism that allows people to thrive and flourish and do their best work, most unlike the traditional pyramid. And pyramids, as you know, literally are tombs in Egypt, for example, but figuratively speaking, there were great ideas and innovations and creativity go to die. And self-management is a robust, constantly evolving, constantly emerging network of self-managed, self-motivated, self-organized individuals, each seeking to do their best work based on the 2 core principles: don't use force and keep commitments. So lest you think that Morningstar is the only company in the world that's self-managed, there are others, other great examples. You probably have heard of some of them on this Teal conference, Joost de Block and Bertzorg. The Hire Group is doing amazing things. The world's largest appliance manufacturer took 70,000 employees worldwide, created 4,000 self-managed teams linked to a platform that gives them instant information and allows them to innovate. Some of those teams are customer facing, some of them are innovation teams. And innovation teams can create new products and services and spin off into new companies. So there are great companies doing amazing things. Nankishore Chowdhury of Jaipur Rugs, a great example of an entrepreneur. He's got 40,000 carpet weavers in small villages throughout India, giving them creativity, self-management, allowing them to go around the world and deliver talks and create their own designs and collect design awards. An amazing story of great creativity and self-management coming from India. So we've got examples from nature as well. You recognize the beautiful double helix of DNA, two strands of the simplest material on earth, sugar and phosphate. And yet between these two strands of sugar and phosphate lies all the information needed to create every living thing on the face of the earth. This very simple structure is creating every living life form, managing extreme complexity through great simplicity. One of the benefits that we experienced at Morningstar is that we have tremendous engagement, not only on the part of year-round colleagues, but there's a large seasonal workforce, people that only work 3.5 months out of the year. So this is an example of a fire that Morningstar experienced in 2021. And 3 weeks ago, we had another fire. And the fire 3 weeks ago broke out inside a structure. And it endangered $2 million worth of product, about $300,000 worth of equipment, and the structure itself. We had 3 colleagues, seasonal colleagues, who came in from their off-season downtime to salvage the product, working around the clock for 3 days, virtually without sleep, because they felt engaged around the work that they had performed during the summer, and they did not want to see it lost. So they experienced great engagement, great drive and ambition to preserve the work that they had performed the summer before, showed great heart, amazing levels of stewardship and care and compassion for their fellow colleagues. Those 3 colleagues had no obligation to come in and help put out the fire, and yet they did, because they were so committed to the mission, vision, values, and principles of the Morningstar enterprise. So is it possible to manage great complexity with great simplicity? I'm going to argue that it's not only possible, it's preferable. As Dehawk said, complex rules cause simple, stupid behavior, and simple rules allow for complex, intelligent behavior. Is it time to organize around simple rules and give people their brains back at work and let them express the creativity that every human being has inside? I think it is. So with that, I'll tap the brakes. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we've got a bunch queued up in there. And so definitely add your additional questions in there. Upvote the other ones that you've liked. The one that's gotten several upvotes already is, was there ever a third principle or more principles that were discussed to be added to the 2?
No.
Okay. Quick and easy answer. So it was always those. And a related question was, how did you all get to such a concise question? There's often many of the other sessions talk about consciousness and personal development and the long road. And it sounds like it was a meeting and you all were off to the other races. Was it that simple, or was there some harrowing parts along the way?
I don't know if I call any parts harrowing. I will say that yes, after we met in the trailer and adopted self-management, we were off to the races. That was it. That was the moment where self-management came into existence and at Morningstar. I would say that our lives did not really change much at all after we adopted self-management. Why? Because we were already in hyperdrive mode. We were already working 100-hour weeks at the time, trying to construct this factory as a small team and a team of 24. And so this factory was not trivial. At the time, it was a $27 million US factory. It would be at least double that today, if not more. And so this was a major, major undertaking. And we had a very compressed time frame in which to complete it and bring it online. So just a matter of 6 months, we had to build this factory from scratch. And so we didn't have time to really spend time thinking about the principles when we were in construction mode. We adopted them and went back to work the next day and built the factory, and that was that.
It sounds like an impressive group of people. Another question that stemmed was, it sounds like there's negotiation of the contracts that happens along the way. So how much time do people spend on average addressing and negotiating the clues?
We don't track the average, but I can tell you I helped facilitate a negotiation a week ago. It took a couple hours to sit down with a pair of colleagues and work out a colleague letter of understanding to a draft status. And so that's quite possible. I think it should take at least that much just for an individual to think through what they propose. And it's not a unilateral exercise. What people propose as their role needs to be negotiated and understood by their fellow colleagues. So it is a discussion and a dialogue and an agreement. So at a minimum, it should take a few hours, couple hours at least. But sometimes these agreements can be quite complex and they can take longer. But the simplicity is at the far side of that negotiation of the complex technical details of one's role and responsibility.
So it's a meaningful investment, but worth it is what I'm hearing.
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. Great return on investment. As I said, it's a complete replacement for bureaucracy. And if you're in a bureaucratic organization, you should want to do something like this as well, because why wouldn't you want to know what your purpose is in the workplace and what services you provide and what is the scope of your exact decision-making authority and how is your performance gained and measured. Well, why wouldn't everybody want to know those things? Those are very basic things that everyone should want to know.
And there's been a lot of praise in the chat. People loving the Morningstar story and how you tell it. And there's also some desires from what didn't work or what was less successful as you were going along.
Well, I'd say a challenge, I characterize it as an ongoing challenge, is that human beings have a natural reluctance to approach other people about perceived substandard performance, for example, or ways to improve. Not everyone is great at delivering feedback to other people. And so sometimes conversations that should be held are avoided, and those are lost opportunities for improvement. So we would prefer that everyone would be courageous enough to initiate important conversations, crucial conversations, sometimes potentially difficult conversations, but there is kind of a natural human reluctance to do that. And some people are very good at it and others aren't. So I would say that kind of feedback unevenness is a kind of an ongoing human challenge.
Yeah, any things that helped bolster those that were less capable in that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we do a lot of coaching and mentoring, training, and we give people scripts. We have a process called gaining agreement, which is a way to break an impasse and to resolve a difference of opinion between any two people around any conceivable issue. And so we do rather intensive training in how to execute that process. And that is something that anyone in the enterprise can avail themselves of at any time. So there is kind of ongoing coaching, mentoring, facilitation, training, equipping, educating, that never stops. And so we need to keep doing that. We found that that's just something that you can't just hand people a sheet of paper with a process on it and expect them to incorporate it and follow it. People need to be educated and equipped and given practice so that they know how to deal with these things.
Excellent. And I see Daniel with his hand raised. I'm going to go to one more from the Minty, but I think we're a small enough group that we can even have people that that want to. So we'll alternate back and forth. Raise your hand if you want to ask your question that way. And right now from Minty, is there any people for performance system, and relatedly, how are bonuses distributed?
So the performance system is what we call stepping stones. Most companies have what they call metrics, measures, KPIs, OKRs, something along those lines. We call metrics at Morningstar stepping stones. And we call them stepping stones because we try to identify measures that are stepping stones toward perfection. So we have a vision of perfect results for virtually every process for which people are responsible. And so what is perfection for a cost metric? Perfection for a cost metric is 0. Perfection for a quality metric is 0 defects. The perfection for an efficiency metric is 100%. So we benchmark perfection. We don't benchmark other sectors, other industries, other companies necessarily. We benchmark perfection. Why? Because we believe that unlocks blue sky innovation thinking. And we've seen lots of examples of that, like the example of the mechanic that transcended traditional chemical material handling and found a way to do it far more efficiently in the factory. So benchmarking perfection, and then we collect information and feed it back. And the stepping stones are generally expressed in 2-dimensional line graphs showing trends over time. And so those are published transparently across the enterprise. The idea there is that they trigger conversations by and between colleagues. So if I have a fellow colleague and her trend line is bending down, the conversation should be, what can we do to help you turn the trend in the right direction? Or if it's already trending up, what can we do to help you bend the curve even steeper? So everything is accomplished by peer regulation, peer feedback, transparent publication of data and stepping stones information, widely shared and understood. And that's really the performance system. Bonuses, there's no structured bonus. There's a discretionary bonus at the end of every production season. Production seasons are intense, generally during the summer, 3.5 months of 24/7 operation, after which large parts of the factories shut down. Not entirely, but large parts of the factories shut down. And so it's a very seasonal operation. So during the production season, many colleagues work 60-hour weeks. And so there's generally some kind of discretionary bonus at the end of the season, but there's nothing particularly guaranteed. There's no formula, there's no strict algorithmic bonus. It's just discretionary, generally at the end of the season.
Excellent. Go over to Daniel for his question.
Yes, so first I thank you for a very great explanation and for a very interesting topic. So I was really following very well and how to manage complexity with simplicity. And I work in an organization here in the DRC because I'm in Kinshasa, Congo. We use a self-organization system. We use holacracy, and it is about really giving power to members to execute tasks or roles. So, but we find that there are two things like giving power and other members to using or receiving and using power. So it's becoming now challenging for other people to recognize their power and use them into the organization. You can give them the power to work, to use creativity, and you find that you really need to push to give like some of the few instructions or to help them still. Then my question is what is the strategies you can use to why when you give people power, they really make use of them for the good of the organization without you again putting much effort or even sometimes leading everything?
Well, the power that people have, they have it from the first day they start work. So everyone has all the power they need to execute their mission from the day they start. They have the power to acquire resources, to build relationships, and to do their best work. And the fact is that people have free will. So we look at philosophers like Immanuel Kant said people are the ends, not a means to an end, and people have free will. And people will exercise their free will in different ways. So if people exercise their free will to take on a large quantum of responsibility and accountability, and to build great relationships, and to be visionary and thoughtful and maintain great relationships, that's great. If other people choose to use what power they have to suboptimally perform, to do less than they could, to not build great relationships, they're just exercising their free will. And people are going to do what they're going to do. We can't force them to behave in certain ways. We can create opportunities, and everyone has those opportunities because they are completely free to define and negotiate and pursue their respective missions. But what they do with those missions is completely up to them. And they're free to leave, and fellow colleagues are free to ask other fellow colleagues to leave. No one can fire another person because that's an exercise of force, but anyone can ask anyone else to leave, and that happens with some regularity. So people are free to do whatever they want. But we find that when people own decisions and are treated like adults and treated as responsible people, they tend to step up and do great work and exercise full creativity, innovation, and leadership.
Do many people refuse the request to leave, or do the requests to leave happen very often?
What happens occasionally, not a lot, but it happens probably a few times a year. And yeah, some people decline. I mentioned the gaining agreement process. So if I ask someone to leave, they have a professional obligation to respond to my request. And if they decline to leave and I still believe in my request, we can escalate it to a third-party mediator, who would be another colleague, whose job is just to offer their best opinion about the circumstances. If the person still refuses the request, we can escalate it then to a group of mediators whose job is the same as the first mediator. And if the person still refuses the request, then we can take the issue to binding arbitration with the president of the company. Now, I would say many people do decline requests to leave, but some accept it. I've heard people say, yeah, you're right, I should leave. I'm not really doing a good job. So yeah, I'll leave. And their obligation is to respond one way or the other and to follow the process. And that's what happened.
Excellent. Seems like there's a lot of love around those two principles, and any backstory behind them. Was it kind of like Moses going up the other mountain and coming back down, and it was a magical moment, or is there some other place or source that those came from that you're aware of?
Well, it's so interesting because in a startup organization, the original startup founding members are really carrying the cultural DNA of the enterprise. And so when we adopted those principles, they became very, very important. And we embedded those deeply in the culture of the enterprise. And so as we expanded and built additional factories, some of the original colleagues who were in that trailer and adopted self-management originally were taking that cultural DNA to those new sites. And so we were able to propagate the culture that way and sort of build it into the enterprise. And so it's really so deeply embedded in the culture now that it would be, I can't imagine people deciding not to embrace those two principles at this point in time. People know what they're getting into in the hiring process. Those principles are explained exhaustively, so people are not surprised when they join the enterprise about the importance, the supreme importance of the principles.
Still curiosity on where they came from, but a related question on the implementation of them is everybody's got a different understanding of what force is. Did Morningstar, did you all provide any definition, or how did employees and other people interpret what force was as things grew?
Well, I think we had a pretty basic understanding of force when we started. So examples of force in organizations today are a boss telling someone what to do. So I want you to stop doing project X and start working on project Y. And the person has no input. So they're not asked for their opinion. They're just told that this is what you're going to do. So that's what prevails in the military, for example. It doesn't have to prevail in business organizations. And we proved that. So in the traditional organization, there are, generally speaking, different studies differ, but one common ratio is one boss for every 10 employees. And bosses are almost always paid more than the employees they manage. And so bosses give orders and employees follow. And that was really the system that was adopted by industry in the industrial age. That's what the Western Railway brought over from Prussia through Major Whistler. So he created the world's first known business org chart. And it was all about command and control. People at the top give orders to people below them, who give orders to people below them, and people are expected to follow the orders they give. And that was our understanding of what we were abandoning. We were getting rid of that. Everything is accomplished through request and response. No one can tell you what to do, and that includes firing people. No one can walk up to another person and unilaterally terminate their employment. That is not okay. So that was our understanding of force in a business context, commercial context, and that's how we've always understood it.
All right, this might be our last question. We'll see. This person share a perspective in finding that often people's governance literacy, things like decision-making, understanding needs, asking for, and even offering commitments can start off to be really low at the beginning. So how did you all and Morningstar help new people develop and improve this skill?
We do a lot of education, training, equipping, coaching, mentoring, a lot. It is nonstop. And it really started in the late 2000s. I mean, we ran for 6 years without having a colleague letter of understanding. So let me be clear, that didn't come in with the first year of operation. We only introduced the agreements process when we built our second factory and doubled in size and realized we needed a coordination mechanism. So that brought some training and education and development along with it, and helping people understand how to work with each other and work out the roles and responsibilities. And then we started the Self-Management Institute in 2008 with a very formal mission of equipping everyone in the enterprise with the skills needed to facilitate, to understand, to help each other, to coach each other, mentor each other, develop stepping stones, complete their colleague letters of understanding, and deal with all the other artifacts and processes of self-management at a high level. And so now it's just, we have ambassadors throughout the company, 40 or 50 ambassadors, whose part of their role is just to build up and promote and drive self-management on a continuous basis. So lots of mechanisms in place to keep that going now, keep that momentum going.
I'm talking to myself over here. Doug, really appreciate you taking the time and joining us. You dropped a lot of knowledge. Loved, I think I speak for everybody in loving the interactive style. Bring something a little bit different, new and novel, and a little bit of energy bringing, which is always such appreciated in these times of so much that we're trying to take in and absorb. And so thank you for that. For those that want to continue on the conversation, we're going to be continuing on in Garden 4. I dropped a link to the spatial chat in the chat, so feel free to join me over there. But join me in giving a nice round of applause. Feel free to take yourself off mute and share your love, and thanks for Doug.
Thanks, Travis. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm seeing some claps out there as well. That virtual applause. So thanks again, and see those that like over in the spatial chat in just a minute.